Hello everybody, this is Katje. I welcome you to a new video presentation this evening. Tonight I'm wearing a nature-inspired outfit that consists of these short shorts, a camouflage tee, a pair of black flats, and some very simple jewelry to accessorize this outfit. The reason that I'm wearing a nature-inspired outfit is that it fits the theme of the story that I want to tell you tonight. The story actually has two parts, and I'm only going to tell the first part tonight. I'll save the other part for another time. But a good name for this story might be a late summer story, or in German, Altweibersommer Geschichte, because a lot of what happens in the story takes place in the late summer. And the story is about nature. In particular, it's about some odd experiences that I have had of nature when I was growing up as a child and a young person in Tennessee. So that's the reason that I'm wearing this nature-inspired outfit. I also, in my last video, mentioned that I have had some rather odd experiences in my life. This is one of them, and so I wanted to share that with you. Now, before I get into the first part of my story, I wanted to make 2 points. I want to preface it with 2 points about nature. The first point is that nature, when I was growing up I grew up in a small town in eastern Tennessee that was had about 10,000 people, a population of about 10,000, and all around it were beautiful mountains and forests and streams, so the nature was very prominent. And when I was growing up, nature was always sort of in the back of my mind or in the back of my awareness. It was kind of like a looming presence. One way you might think about this is sort of like a comparison. If somebody grows up in a large city or in a suburb near a large city, the city itself becomes sort of part of the background of your awareness. It's always there in the back of your mind. You're always aware of it on some level. And so that's how nature was to me as a child and a young person growing up in this small town. The second thing I wanted to say is that as a young person, and as a child, as a young person, and even today, I tend to believe that not just the things in nature like plants and animals are alive, but that nature itself is a living presence. It's alive, or at least a particular natural environment. Not just the things, not just the trees, the plants, the flowers, and the animals in that natural environment, but that environment itself sometimes, in some cases at least, is alive and maybe even has a certain kind of awareness or spirit to it. So I want to talk about that in this story. I'll give you an example of that as I proceed with the story. But the story begins when, many years ago, my father was a small airplane pilot, and he was flying over the mountains of eastern Tennessee, and he looked down out from the plane, he looked down, and he saw this kind of beautiful natural clearing that was formed by a stream coming down the mountain. So what happened was that the stream coming down the mountain parted into 2 branches that then rejoined below, forming this kind of natural island that had this beautiful emerald color. He used to talk about it, and it was, he could describe it very vividly. So he took an interest in this rural property, which was about 26 miles away from the town where I grew up, so it was rather isolated. I think there was only one road that went out there. And he bought it. He bought this property, and he built a cabin on it, and some sheds and a barn, and he turned it into a very nice retreat, where we would go in the summer and spend a lot of time to get out of the city and just enjoy the beauty of nature. So we spent a lot of time there when I was a child and a young person when I was growing up. Now, at some point, my father got a little carried away because he wasn't satisfied with just developing this tract to the point where he had this very nice retreat, but he had a workman, somebody who worked for him, who liked to tinker with a lot of things. So he liked to drive the bulldozer and grade dirt and chop down trees, and he would change something and then he would keep going at it instead of leaving it alone. So I don't know exactly what he did, but probably at some point he was bulldozing up at the top of this island, and he shoved too much dirt into the right-hand branch of the stream. Once the stream parted into two branches, he shoved too much dirt into this part up near the top, so that whereas previously both branches had equal amounts of water in them, there was an equilibrium in the water level, now too much water came down this way and not enough water came down the other way. So we tried to figure out what to do about that, and we came up with a sort of kind of a solution. It was a partial solution, and that is that a conduit was dug from the top of this stream branch over to the other one, so that some of the water would be diverted back into the branch that was going to dry. Now, it turned out that this was not going to work, and I'll come back to that in the second part of my story, but I think it's a good example, as you'll see, I hope, that it's not a good idea to start messing around too much with nature, because that will come back to haunt you. It will come back to have bad consequences. That's what's going to happen later. But in any event, this is what was done, and so for a long time, everything proceeded okay, everything was all right. Now, the next part of the story is that I remember when I would go out to the place in the mountains as a child, I was very much aware of the nature around the cabin, and part of it was that we were so far away from town, it was very remote, and the nature was almost like a brooding presence. It was almost like a person that was there. I felt as a child very strongly that it was, as I said earlier, alive and aware of us, not just particular animals out in the forest, but the forest itself, or the nature itself surrounding us had this kind of presence, almost as if it were a living thing. And so I remember one time when I was a little bit older, I was out at the place in the mountains, in the cabin, alone, and it was in the late summer, and so I spent a couple of nights out there, and I remember at one point after I had gone to bed, and it was completely dark, I felt like there was somebody or something around the cabin. It wasn't necessarily a negative feeling, but it was definitely as if somebody were walking around your house, but it wasn't a person. It was the natural environment surrounding the house, and I became very aware of this presence, almost like something was watching me or was aware of the fact that I was there. And like I said, I wasn't afraid of that, but I was certainly cautious and on my guard, because probably for the first time I became vividly aware of that. It was like there was something there. So this experience, at first I thought, well, maybe this is just myself, maybe I'm projecting this, or maybe it's just something going on in me. But the thing that convinced me that wasn't the case was many years later, or maybe 5 or 6 years later, not that long, I was there with a friend, and we both went to sleep, and it was also in the late summer, and the next morning we woke up and we each told each other, well, we felt that there was somebody outside, or there was something outside, there was this presence all around us, very much like the presence that I had experienced years before. But this other person had the same experience, and I hadn't even discussed that with him. I never brought it up, but then he began to talk about it, and as he talked about it, I realized that what he was describing was very similar to what I had experienced, and so that made me think that it wasn't just something in me, it was also something out in the nature or the natural environment surrounding this cabin in this very beautiful place in the mountains. So that's the first part of the story, and next time I want to finish it and come back to what were some very negative consequences of this tinkering that the workman, the person who worked for my father did, that came back to haunt us in a very kind of disturbing way. Fortunately, the story has a happy ending, but I just wanted to start out by relating this experience to you, beginning to tell you about it, and next time I will complete the story, but until then, thank you for joining me, and let me just take one more turn in my nature girl outfit. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking with you more about this experience. Until then, this is Katje wishing everybody a good, safe, and restful night. Bye-bye.